I keep hearing that people say it feels like 1938 again, and probably not a lot of you were alive in 1938. But nonetheless, we understand our history and we know what happened in 1938 when Chamberlain was saying we're going to have peace in our time, holding up that piece of paper, that agreement that he had with Adolf Hitler that was not worth the ink or the paper it was printed on. Okay, so Anton Gerashenko had a really interesting discussion about this, about the Munich Agreement. And in light of what's about to happen next week, I thought it was worth sharing. The Munich Agreement, history lessons. Looking at current events, of course, 1938 comes to mind. And again, a lot of people have said this, but I mean, it's in technicolor when you see what all happened in 1938. It was in Munich in 1938 that Great Britain and France signed an agreement with Germany and Italy to appease Hitler. Okay, but nothing happened between France and Germany or France and England on one side and Germany and Italy on the other at that point. It was about a third party, and that was, well, you'll see. It was also known as the Munich Betrayal. In 1938, Great Britain and France, seeking to avoid war, signed the Munich Agreement, allowing Hitler to occupy the Sudetenland, where many ethnic Germans lived. Does that sound familiar? Where we have to protect our ethnic fill in the blank? Czechoslovakia was not even invited to the negotiations, but it was their land that was being stripped away from them, and larger powers were making decisions for them. It was simply presented to them as a done deal. We don't want that to happen. We don't want to repeat those kind of errors. Upon returning to London, then Prime Minister Chamberlain solemnly declared peace in our time. He was cheered. He was a hero. Now you have to remember at that time, the memory of this was 1938, the memory of 20 years ago, you were in World War II 20 years ago, right? And so those memories are fairly fresh. They didn't want to repeat that. They were happy to have dodged a bullet. Just 6 months later, Hitler violated the agreement. Wait a minute, I thought Hitler just signed the agreement. Yes, but tyrants sign agreements that they aren't going to live up to. He violated the agreement by occupying all of Czechoslovakia. Okay, well, we'll give him the Sudetenland. Okay, he'll be pacified. No. Oh, we'll give him all of Czechoslovakia. He'll be pacified. And then what was next? Poland. Soon after, unleashing World War II. The Munich conspiracy became a vivid example of how making concessions to dictators leads not to peace, but to even greater aggression. I'm hard-pressed to think of a time in human history where that was not so. It seems like, generally speaking, if you appease a dictator or a tyrant, somebody that's authoritarian and aggressive in that way, this always comes back. I mean, we even have a children's book. If you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for more and come back and come back and come back. It was a failure of the appeasement policy, which cost the world tens of millions of lives. That's right. World War II didn't have to be World War II. In fact, I read somewhere, because I studied the Holocaust in my master's thesis, I read somewhere that Hitler said, like, if I'd been stopped at the Sudetenland, I would have stopped. Like, okay. 87 years later, the world is once again facing challenges that demand wisdom. History teaches us that dialogue with dictators is only possible from a position of strength and unity. That's right. You can talk to the dictator, but it can't be to say, please, dictator, don't do this bad thing. It can be like, nope, that's not going to happen. There's a difference. There's a huge difference between those two ways that you interact with the dictator. Concessions only fuel the appetite, and mistakes come at a very, very high price. All that is very fair. Okay, so here's the actual 2 minutes and 27 seconds worth of the Peace in Our Time newsreel. I want to point out something when we start. Look at this. At the very beginning of the newsreel, it shows this. One man saved us from the greatest war of all. Like, that's how it was framed at the time. So here is Chamberlain. He's getting off the plane and he's coming down. The crowd is going to be roaring. They're very happy about whatever he's, they're excited. They're exuberant. He's hailed as a hero. And at that time, I think he thought he was a hero. Yeah, they're really excited about this.
So our Prime Minister
his
third and greatest journey, and he said
that the settlement of the Czechoslovakian problem, which has now been achieved, is, in my view, only the prelude to a larger settlement in which all Europe may find peace.
Well, it was a prelude from one thing to another. That is for sure. But Hitler saw it very differently. And remember, like, so there was a kid down there that lived like 3 blocks from me. Well, his older brother, this guy, he actually taught me how to shoot baskets and basketball properly. His name is Eric. He's walking down the street. He has a black eye. And I said, Eric, what happened to you? He said, well, he wanted to fight and I didn't, so we fought. That's what will happen when you're dealing with a dictator.
This morning, I had another talk with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler. And here is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine.
And that and $5 will get you a Starbucks, right? I mean, that it's worthless. It doesn't mean anything. They'll lie and then cross you. I mean, so if you're trusting on it, like normal people would trust each other on that. They're not normal people and they'll do bad things. And see if they've done it before. Like that's the track record, right? See if they've crossed things before, if they said they wouldn't do it and they did it already, like Putin did in 2022, and before that in 2014, that's a sign that you can't trust him now. And he's being cheered for this. Like, that's the thing. Like, yay, he's holding up his paper. Yay, we're going to have peace in our time.
Some of you perhaps have already heard what it contains, but I would just like to read it to you.
It doesn't matter what it contains because Hitler's not going to abide by it. So, yeah.
We, the German Führer and Chancellor, and the British Prime Minister have had a further meeting today and are agreed in recognizing that the question of Anglo-German relations is of the first importance for the two countries and for Europe. We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again.
That's a great statement, but it's not true. And if it's not true and you're depending upon it, I mean, it's like that's where we're potentially headed, and we got to not do that. And the crowd is roaring for that because they don't want war. They wanted peace, but Hitler didn't, and that's the key.
We are resolved that the method of consultation shall be the method adopted to deal with any other questions that may concern our two countries, and we are determined to continue our efforts to remove possible sources of difference and thus to contribute to assure the peace of Europe.
Well, of course, Hitler is going to try to remove all sources of differences, but not in the way that he was expecting. All right. So with that as a backdrop, with the negotiations that are going on right now, what did you think about what you saw? Put that in the comments below. I hope that was helpful and instructive to understand where we've been, because I know, like, people will say history repeats itself. It doesn't really, but we kind of do the same stupid things over and over again. Some have said history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, right? Yeah, we keep doing the same things. We don't seem to learn. Put it in the comments below. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.